Welcome to the IREL podcast. Are you sick and tired of real estate gurus pitching their next pre-construction deal only to find out years later they were completely wrong? Worried the next overseas conference you spend thousands to attend will only be used to sell overpriced lots and deserted developments? Join thousands of other international real estate seekers who are looking for their place in paradise without the sales pitch. Straight from your host, Taylor White.
Hey, real estate seeker. Welcome to the Overseas Property Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor White. I am proud to say this episode is brought to your earbuds courtesy of my friends at Shoeboxed. Shoeboxed is the fastest way to turn a pile of receipts into digital data to save you time, money, and hassle. The best part? You can get started completely free. Head on over to irelpodcast.com/shoe for more details. We hear from one of our most intelligent insiders yet when I sit down and speak with Alice Jungclaus from Global Wise Parenting, who is an international educator and coaches families on living overseas. Alice has either lived or traveled all over Asia, is a Canadian now living in Switzerland, and coaches families about the best strategies and tactics in living without borders. Complete show notes can be found at irelpodcast.com/Alice Jungclaus. Instead of telling you more, let's join Alice from Switzerland. What's going on, Alice? It's Taylor White. I'm excited to have you on the podcast straight from Switzerland so we can get to know you personally. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, it's great to be here, Taylor. I'm a Canadian, actually, from Vancouver, Canada, and I live in Switzerland, beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. I'm an international educator.
International educator. Maybe explain a little bit more what that is.
Well, my day-to-day life, back home, it would be called a teacher, where I'm from in Canada. But I don't teach in public schools. I teach in international schools by day.
And then, Alice, I know that you have a lot of exciting things on your plate. You're a global lifestyle coach that focuses on families living overseas and launching within a few days or a few weeks. You have globalwiseparenting.com. Maybe speak a little bit more about that.
I'd love to. That's kind of my heart project. Global Wise Parenting is really just a safe space for parents that are globally mobile, have a global lifestyle, and want to ensure that their children adapt well in their chosen location.
Love it. And can you maybe speak a little bit more about some of the places that you've traveled so far, Alice?
I've been a lot, mostly in East Asia, one of my favorite places in the world, Hong Kong. I lived there for 7 years. I lived in southern Japan in a place called Fukuoka, and I've traveled to Singapore, and I've been to Thailand, pretty much all over Southeast Asia.
So, Alice, I have to ask, what languages do you speak? Because I can tell already you're going to speak a few others than just English.
Yes, my first language is Cree, because my mother's American Indian from Canada, but it's not so great anymore. I speak English. I speak French as well. I'm a French teacher, and I have basic German. And I can get by in broken Cantonese from living in Hong Kong for 7 years.
Holy smokes, Alice. I can tell that you're extremely intelligent. I can almost speak English, and I think, if I counted correctly, that was about 5 languages.
Yeah, but, there's a range of fluency there.
So if you don't mind, I would like to do a little friendly smackdown, if you will, of some of the places that you have been for a little compare contrast so people listening can have an idea of some of the places, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. How would you compare some of the places that you've been in Japan versus some of the spots that you've been in Hong Kong? Maybe some things that you like, maybe some things that you didn't like, that kind of thing.
Oh, love it. I'll start with Japan because Japan is a beautiful country. So I love the natural landscapes. Being from the west coast of Canada, it really spoke to me. The seasons change. So if you love seasons like I do, it's a beautiful place to be to see the cherry blossoms, the winterscapes, and all the traditions that go along with the seasons changing. I actually like the language of Japan. So for me, that was a plus. There's a whole different range of formality that doesn't exist in the English that you and I are speaking now. So if you're curious about languages, it's a great place to dig in deep. There are 3 writing systems. So again, if you're a linguist, you'll love Japan. The food is spectacular, and the culture is quite proud and intact, and I would say quite homogenous in ways that you may not see if you're from North America or US or Canada anymore, because we're such a diverse kind of part of the world. Hong Kong, wow. Hong Kong is very diverse, even though you might think right away Chinese. It's very diverse compared to Japan, I would say. There are little neighborhoods that could be, little Japantown, little India. It's very, very rich in terms of food, history, culture. I love the vibrancy. And I love that it's easy to live there when you don't speak the language. Unlike Japan, the language in Hong Kong is quite easily English if you want it to be.
And how about Singapore?
Singapore, food. First thing that comes to mind is delicious food.
Really?
Yeah, the hawker stalls. I'm an Asian girl at heart, even though I'm not Asian. And I think Singapore's food is just delicious. As far as the diversity is concerned, I really appreciated that about Singapore. The languages that coexist in seeming harmony was really pleasing to me. The heat, though, and the lack of seasons was definitely not on my plus list. Yeah, I think I would like to be in a place where there are seasons.
Let's be honest, being someplace in Southeast Asia or Asia in general is awesome because the food is so amazing.
I agree with you fully.
So I have to ask, you're from Vancouver, Canada, which is an amazing place. Why are you traveling so much, or why are you living overseas?
Great question. Vancouver, when I was growing up, was, a Canadian town, I would say. It was diverse, but not as cosmopolitan as it is now. So by the time I finished my university schooling, I had been exposed to food from Iran, Farsi language. Many Hong Kong Chinese had come to Vancouver. It was a natural thing for me to want to explore some of the worlds that my classmates came from. So we had a lot of Japanese coming to study English in Vancouver. As I said, Hong Kong Chinese were right next to me in class by the time I graduated from high school. So I took the leap to go to Hong Kong as my first overseas teaching experience.
So, Alice, there's a belief that there's 2 types of travelers, or that only 2 types can travel. One would be if you're young and you're single and you have no responsibilities. The other would be if you are wealthy and you have lots of money, but not much else to do. How is it traveling with a family?
Very different than traveling as a single. I've done both. I was a free-spirited expat, child-free, even partner-free for a few of my years abroad. And there's a different psychology to that. And there's a different level of commitment. So with a family, I would say you start to look at things for your children's future. And it's less about living in the moment than it is when I was single, which is more about the adventure and the excitement and the experiences, which are so valuable. And I think important too, if you're thinking of raising kids abroad. I think you need to experience a few places before, digging in and maybe trying to raise your children abroad.
Alice, I'm sure every place that you've been, you can find something that you like, but I'm going to flip it on you. Where's one place that you've been where you're kind of thinking to yourself, it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be?
Oh, easy. Back to your first question, Japan.
Oh, okay.
I did what a lot of expats do, I think all human beings do, is you go with an assumption, right? And like I said, growing up, I'd met a lot of Japanese people. I thought I knew what Japan was about. And I had lived in Hong Kong for 7 years. So I thought, hey, I'll go to Japan. It won't be much different. It's still Southeast Asia. How wrong was I? I was faced with a very different cultural environment naturally, but more different than I could have imagined. So I didn't expect that. And I was quite disappointed in myself, actually, to have fooled myself to think that I knew what Japan would be like having been in Hong Kong. I really think it's important that you study the history, not just of the place you're going to, but the relationship between countries in a region. That was the key I was missing.
So, Alice, you've been to a lot of awesome places. I'm sure along the way you've picked up some travel hacking tips that you might be able to share. And I'm going to throw a couple out, and I'd love to get a few words on those if you feel comfortable. The first thing that comes to mind, traveling wise, is banking or how you're going to pay for things. So, what's maybe one tip or strategy that you can share as far as banking's concerned?
Online banking is so key if you're going to,
Huge, right?
yeah, it's I don't know how I would have done it pre-online banking. Yeah. So the first thing I'd say, tip wherever you're going is or intending to go is to find out if online banking is an option, and B, is it safe? Is it secure?
And then I would like to throw in something there. I think it's a good idea too to have two different cards, meaning maybe one Visa, one MasterCard. In case you're traveling, you go to an ATM and it says only MasterCard, and you're like, shoot, I only have a Visa, and then you have to go searching. So I think that's important too.
Absolutely. I've had a MasterCard stolen in Greece, and I had my Visa that saved the day.
So, what might people expect or what should they budget for when traveling? Of course, if you go to Thailand, it's much different than if you go to Singapore, which is much different than if you go to Switzerland. But what are some strategies or things that people should keep in mind?
Oh, first and foremost, health is wealth. It doesn't matter where you're traveling, who you are, you need to make sure that you have got travel insurance for health insurance because the costs vary so much around the world. It could bankrupt you possibly in some countries. So that would be my number one thing is to budget ahead of your trip. That you've got the proper insurance. And even if you do, to budget for what it would cost if you're going to end up in hospital. Traveling is an adventure. People end up in accidents when they're on their adventures, and you don't want your finances to be in the way of you being safe and sound.
What are some strategies? I'm going to kind of put these two together as far as a credit card and airline miles. I don't know if you have any experience in that, but what are maybe some tips that you've experienced traveling to so many different spots as far as credit cards and then airline miles?
Credit cards and airline miles, I've never mixed the two, but airline miles, big time. My husband has definitely used his credit card for airline miles, and we've benefited from the accumulated points that he's had from these programs for vacations. I've chosen to go another route, which is to be very loyal to a particular airline that I like. For example, when I was in Hong Kong, and there was a favorite airline that came out of Hong Kong that I enjoyed flying a lot. They had super rewards programs, and I was able to get, a trip back home to Vancouver just from my frequent flying around Asia.
So then, Alice, you're traveling a lot. You go from place to place. What are some tips that you might share as far as running your business from anywhere that you have Wi-Fi?
Oh, yes. That's how I run my side business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And being online allows you to connect with people all around the world. And when we have global lifestyles, we are no longer in that physical space called our nation, whatever our passport country is, where we're from. And it's hard to connect. This internet age has allowed us to support and connect with one another from just about anywhere in the world where there's Wi-Fi. So I will coach parents from my vacation if I'm in Tuscany with my family, or when I'm finished my teaching duties, I can get on Skype and I can coach my parents that are in need around the world.
And then, Alice, I would love to deep dive a little bit more into Switzerland. And why are you guys based now in Switzerland versus some other great spots?
Great question. Short answer, it's a multicultural, multilingual, interdependent country, which is very secure, very safe, very family friendly. That's the number one reason we came. With that in mind, being parents and loving the global lifestyle, where could we raise our child in a place that's safe, that will give our child language opportunities and has a fabulous infrastructure?
So talk to me. I know that there's a lot of fun things to do, a lot of great restaurants, places to go. Maybe share some of your favorites.
Well, I came to Switzerland the first time in the early 90s, and I went to Luzern. In English, I think it's Lucerne. It's a beautiful, quaint Swiss city that I think anyone who visits the country should check out. You can see the lakes and the mountains all nestled together. You can ride a gondola up a mountain and then take a cog railway train down the other side, and then have lunch on a boat all in the same day. It's gorgeous. And I also would recommend some of the other language areas, like in the southern part of Switzerland, you can go to the Italian region where the climate is different, and you can be walking along a seawall in Lugano that feels like you're in Italy.
So people are listening to this. They love Switzerland. What might somebody do as far as a visa is concerned?
Well, as with most countries, visas are determined based on your passport country. So the regulations and rules are going to be different depending on what passport you have. For me as a Canadian, it was a matter of getting an employment visa. And so that's the route I went. I first found a job in Switzerland when I was outside of Switzerland, then was granted an employment visa after supplying sufficient documentation, and I was able to come in and work.
Alice, you are an absolute pro at this, I can tell.
I've done it a few times. I've done it a few times. Yeah.
You have done it a few times. That's why I love talking to you, because you are an absolute pro. So now that you're living there, why don't we talk about something else basic? How did you find the place that you're living in? Do you find it online? Do you use a realtor? Do you pound the pavement? What do you do to find your place?
Well, I did do some online research. Again, that internet, that Google, I love it. There were,
Love it, right?
yeah,
Just Google it.
yes, there's a website called homegate.ch that has a lot of rental properties in Switzerland. I started there. I started looking at what it costs for your typical, 90 square meter flat and above, and started to compare prices. Of course, another way to research is to, depending on your industry, if you are going to work in the countries, to talk to people in the industry and find out how they found their flats. Insider information is always handy. And if you have that trusted advisor, someone that is a mentor at a company you're going for, great. Otherwise, even just Google. I have found some friendly people working at other organizations that have shared tips with me about where to live and what typical housing prices are. I do that every time I move. Then for this flat that I'm living in now, which is British, I guess, for apartment, for those listeners that aren't used to the word flat, it was something that I found via my employer. After doing my research, I found that this was the best deal.
So, Alice, you're talking about Switzerland. The first thing that comes to mind, besides amazing chocolate, might be cost of living. And I know that you've been to a lot of other spots. How would you compare the cost of living now in Switzerland versus some other spots that you've been?
Well, I'm not going to lie. Switzerland is indeed one of the most expensive cities in the world. It's ranked frequently as one of the highest. Having said that, though, I am living here very well. I'm about an hour and a half walk from Tina Turner's mansion, and I'm doing just fine. It's quality of life is excellent in Switzerland. And as a teacher, as an employed teacher here, I find that my salary is more than enough to afford me the quality of life that I enjoy, which includes occasionally eating out, outdoor activities. I take 1 or 2 vacations a year to other countries, and I enjoy time with my family in the neighborhood. So that is due to a low tax rate, I would say, and very, very careful choices about what to buy in Switzerland and maybe what not to buy in Switzerland.
So, Alice, you're a teacher now. What are you teaching?
I am an international educator at the K to 12 level. So these schools are from kindergarten to grade 12, and we teach an international program to expatriates children who travel the world and have global lifestyles.
Wow, I love that. And is that something that you've been doing for quite some time?
Yes, I've been doing this. That's what I did in Hong Kong. That's what I did in Japan. And I have basically created a fabulous career, which I love, doing this work. There is a lot of other work serving expatriates with global lifestyles, and coaching is another piece of that for me. But this lifestyle is a real one. And there are a lot of people with children abroad that are enjoying being an expat, but also having a family.
So I would love to hit up, finally, globalwiseparenting.com. Can you explain more what that's going to be about?
Well, basically, I'll be available to help any globally mobile parents engage their cultural intelligence so that they can adapt to cross-cultural living. And that's what expatriate living is really all about. It's living across cultures. And why? Simply so that they can feel confident to raise secure, resilient, and happy children who know who they are. There's a lot of talk about third culture kids and children's changing identities when they're raised outside of their home culture. And being intimately involved with international schools for many years has given me an inside view, and I'm really happy to help parents that are in need of that help.
Love it, Alice. And do you have any final pointers or tips that you might want to share?
Well, if you're on your way to Switzerland during the holiday time, be sure to check out the many traditions and festivals in the region. Very rich culture. My favorite time of year is Christmas time. So if you're a Christmas person, this is the Christmas country.
Love it. And Alice, what's the best ways for us to follow you?
Well, I am on Twitter, and I think that would be the best way to engage with me. And that's at Alice Jungclaus, ALICE JUNGCLAUS.
Perfect, Alice. And thank you so much for sharing that today.
Thank you, Taylor. It was a pleasure.
I want to thank Alice once again for giving us her amazing take on overseas living, conducting business, and teaching others to do the same with a family in tow. You can head on over to irelpodcast.com/Alice Jungclaus for complete show notes and easy ways to follow Alice around the world and more information about getting involved with Global Wise Parenting. And don't forget, if you're on the road as much as Alice is, you need an amazing way to keep track of your files and receipts and eliminate paper clutter completely. Head on over to irelpodcast.com/shoe and open your free account right now and see all the benefits Shoebox has to offer. That's irelpodcast.com/shoe to get started.
You have been listening to the IREL Podcast with Taylor White. Be sure to hit up irelpodcast.com for more. That's irelpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.